The alarm screamed through the bridge of the Starlight, and Captain Ryan Miller grabbed the edge of his command chair as the ship shuddered and red warning lights painted everything in crimson, and his crew was already moving to battle stations. Before he could give the order, and outside the viewport space itself seemed to be tearing open. Unknown vessel approaching fast. Lieutenant Amy Chen shouted from tactical, and her fingers flying over her console. And sir, the energy readings are off. The charts, and I've never seen anything like this. Ryan felt his heart pounding but kept his voice steady, and all hands to battle stations and raise shields, and somebody tell me what we're dealing with. The tear in space grew wider and wider until it looked like a wound in reality itself, and through it came a ship that made Ryan's breath catch in his throat. And it was massive and elegant, and looked like it had been carved from a single piece of crystal that caught the starlight and scattered it into 1,000 colors, and behind it more ships were emerging, and dozens of them, and all with the same impossible beauty and the same terrifying weapons arrays. Sir, we're being hailed, Amy said, and her voice tight with tension. Ryan straightened, in his chair and on screen. The view screen flickered and then filled with an image that belonged in a fantasy story, and not in the bridge of a military starship, and the woman looking back at him had silver hair that seemed to glow with its own light, and ears that came to sharp points, and eyes that burned with purple fire, and she wore armor that looked like it was made from moonlight. And behind her Ryan could see more of those crystal corridors and crew members that all had the same otherworldly beauty human vessel. This is Commander Lyra Moonwhisper of the Celestial Fleet, and you will surrender immediately, or be destroyed. Ryan's tactical officer was frantically checking readings, and Captain, she has 200 warships behind her, and each one could level a city, and were outgunned by a factor of, and she paused and swallowed hard, and by a factor of everything. Ryan kept his eyes on the elf woman who was watching him with an expression of cold authority. And this is Captain Ryan Miller of the Earth vessel Starlight, and we're on a peaceful exploration mission, and we have no hostile intent. Lyra raised one elegant eyebrow, and your intent is irrelevant, and this sector has been claimed by the Celestial Empire, and you will surrender your vessel and submit to processing. Processing, Ryan repeated, and what exactly does that mean? Before Lyra could answer, something small and fast suddenly darted into view on the screen, and it was a young elf girl with the same silver hair as the commander, but tied up in 2 bouncing ponytails, and her purple eyes were huge and bright with curiosity. And on her shoulder sat a small dragon, no bigger than a cat, with scales that sparkled like rubies. Mom, is that a human? The girl squealed, and bouncing on her toes, and a real actual human, and oh my stars, he's even better than the report said. Maya, Lyra said sharply, and her commanding tone cracking for just a moment, and return to your quarters immediately. But Mom, I want to see the human, and please, can I talk to him? And you promised if we found more humans I could meet them. The little dragon on her shoulder chirped in agreement and sent a small puff of smoke into the air, and Ryan found himself staring, because this was not how first contact scenarios were supposed to go, and his crew looked equally baffled, and the elf commander looked like she wanted to disappear. Maya, this is not appropriate, and Lyra started, but the girl had already pushed closer to the screen and was pressing her hands against it like she could reach through a human. She said brightly, and Maya, and this is Ember, and he's my best friend, and Mom says humans are interesting because you do weird things like keep pets and have family dinners. And is it true that human parents stay with their children instead of sending them to training academies? Ryan blinked and looked at his first officer, who just shrugged with an expression that said this was above his pay grade, and, yes, that's true, and most human children live with their parents. Maya's eyes went even wider, and that's so cool, and I read all about it in the cultural database. And humans have this thing called adoption, where you can choose your family and not just be assigned one, and is that real too? Maya, enough? Lyra said, and her face had taken on a purple tint that might have been the elf equivalent of blushing, and Captain Miller. I apologize for this interruption and surrender your vessel or face immediate destruction, but Maya wasn't done, and she looked up at her mother with an expression of pure determination. And Mom, remember what you promised. I promised nothing, Lyra said. But there was something uncertain in her voice now. Yes, you did, and you said if I stopped complaining about the invasion schedule you would consider my request, and, Well, I've been good for 3 whole weeks, and I even did all my magic studies without arguing. Lyra closed her eyes for a long moment, and when I said consider, I did not mean, and you promised. Maya insisted, and her voice taking on a stubborn edge, and I found a human, and he's right here, and so you have to keep your promise. Ryan was thoroughly lost now, and, excuse me, but what promise are we talking about? Maya turned back to the screen, with a smile so bright it was almost blinding, and Mom promised that if I found a suitable human, and if he agreed, then she would stop invading planets, and she said the exact words. And I have it recorded. The bridge of the starlight went dead silent, and Ryan heard someone drop their tablet in the background, and Lyra looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole, and her commanding presence had completely evaporated. You recorded that, Lyra said weakly. Maya nodded proudly. And you said, and I quote, "And if you find a human who agrees to this ridiculous plan, then I will cease all hostile actions and honor the ancient family covenant." And unquote. Ryan leaned forward in his chair and his mind racing. And let me make sure I understand. This and your daughter wants what exactly? Maya took a deep breath and her hands clasped together like she was making a wish. And I want a human dad, and I read all about human families and how parents teach their children and play with them and protect them, and it sounds wonderful, and Mom is always busy with the fleet, and I just want someone who has time for me. The small dragon. Ember nuzzled against Maya's cheek and made a soft cooing sound, and Lyra's expression had gone from embarrassed to something much more complicated and something that looked like pain and love and guilt all mixed together. "Maya, sweetheart," Lyra said softly, and her command voice completely gone now. "And we discussed this. And humans are not like us. And they have short lives and different customs and—" "But you promised," Maya whispered, and her eyes filling with tears, "and you said if one agreed you would stop, and you said you were tired of war too." Ryan watched Lyra close her eyes and saw her shoulders slump, and for just a moment she didn't look like a terrifying fleet commander, but just a tired mother who had made a rash promise to her daughter and didn't know how to take it back. "Captain Miller," Lyra said finally, and opening her eyes to look at him directly, "and my daughter has invoked an ancient law of our people, and if a child requests a family bond, and if the potential parent agrees, then all hostilities must cease immediately, and it is our oldest and most sacred law. So if I agreed to this," Ryan said slowly, and his tactical officer making frantic no gestures behind him, "and your entire invasion force would stand down." Lyra nodded stiffly. "And my word is binding, and the Celestial Fleet would withdraw from this sector permanently." Maya was watching him with such desperate hope that it made Ryan's chest ache, and, "Please," she whispered, "and I'll be good, and I promise. And I just want a dad." Ryan stared at the view screen where a 7-year-old elf girl was looking at him with desperate hope, while her mother, the commander of a fleet that could destroy Earth, stood silently behind her. And the bridge crew was watching him like he held the fate of humanity in his hands. And maybe he did. Captain, his first officer, whispered, leaning close, and this could be a trap, or it could end a war before it starts. Ryan whispered back and then louder to the screen. And I need time to think about this. And this is not a small decision. Maya's face fell, and the little dragon on her shoulder drooped. And no, she said quickly, and her words tumbling out, and you can't say no, and I waited so long, and Mom said humans were compassionate and kind, and that they valued family above everything, and please don't prove her wrong. The way she said it made Ryan wonder what else Lyra had told her daughter about humans and whether the fleet commander actually respected them or just saw them as another species to conquer. And Lyra herself was watching him with an unreadable expression, and her purple eyes intense. "What would this family bond actually mean?" Ryan asked, "and what would you expect from me?" Maya's whole face brightened, and, oh, I have a list. And she pulled out what looked like a data pad and started reading. And first, you would teach me about human culture, and second, we would have meals together at least once a week, and third, you would attend my dragon riding competitions, and fourth, and Maya. Lyra interrupted gently, and perhaps let the captain ask his questions. Maya nodded, but kept bouncing on her toes, and Ember launched from her shoulder and flew in excited circles around her head, and Ryan noticed that behind Lyra, more elf soldiers had gathered, and they were watching the exchange with expressions ranging from curiosity to disbelief. Would I have to leave Earth? Ryan asked. No, Maya said quickly, and Mom said we could visit Earth and I really want to see it. And the database says you have these things called ice cream and theme parks and oceans. And can we go to the ocean? And I've never seen that much water in one place. You would be free to maintain your duties and station, Lyra said formally, and Maya would visit according to an agreed schedule. And the bond is spiritual, not physical, and you would not be required to change your life entirely, just required to be a father to an alien child whose mother commands a war fleet, Ryan thought but didn't say out loud. And instead he asked, and what happens if I say no? Maya's eyes filled with tears again, and Ember made a distressed chirping sound, and Lyra put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Then we continue as we were, Lyra said quietly, and the invasion proceeds and Maya will be sent to the Advanced Academy as planned, and we will not speak of this again. Maya let out a small sob, and, but you promised. I promised if a human agreed, Lyra said, and her voice gentle but firm, and if Captain Miller declines, then the covenant cannot be invoked. Ryan watched the girl cry and felt something twist in his chest, and he thought about the reports from the frontier, worlds and the colonies that had gone silent and the desperate evacuation orders, and he thought about his own childhood, and his father teaching him to ride a bike, and his mother reading him stories and all the small moments that made a family. Sir, Amy said from Tactical and Earth Command is requesting an update and they want to know what our status is. Tell them. Ryan started and then stopped because, how did you explain this? And tell them we're negotiating. And I need another minute. He looked at Maya, who was wiping her eyes and trying to be brave, and at Lyra, who looked tired and sad, and at the massive fleet behind them that could end human expansion into space before it really began. And he thought about the weight of responsibility and the insanity of the situation and the simple, desperate wish of a lonely child. If I agree, Ryan said slowly, and this is binding and no loopholes and no continued invasions under different pretenses, and the fleet withdraws completely. Lyra straightened, and her hand going to her chest in what was clearly a formal salute or oath gesture, and by the 7 moons and the eternal flame, and by the bond between dragon and rider, and by the covenant of blood and choice. And I, Lyra Moon Whisper, Fleet Commander of the Celestial Empire, do swear that all hostile actions against humanity will cease immediately and permanently, should you accept the family bond with my daughter, and this I swear on my honor and my life and the lives of my fleet. The other elves behind her had gone very still and their faces serious, and Ryan realized this was not just a promise but something sacred and something that carried real weight in their culture. And if something happens to me, Ryan asked, and if I die or am unable to fulfill this bond, then it passes to your designated family, Lyra said. And the bond is with humanity through you and not you alone. And should you be unable to continue, another may take your place with Maya's consent. Maya had stopped crying and was watching him with fragile hope, and, please, she whispered, and I promise I'll be the best daughter ever, and he'll learn everything about humans and he'll never ask for anything else, and just please say yes. Ryan's communications officer spoke up hesitantly. And sir, I've been doing some research on their cultural database, and it's true. And the family bond covenant is their oldest law, and it's never been broken in their recorded history. And if she swears on it, it's as solid as anything we could hope for. Ryan looked at his crew and saw his first officer nod slightly, and his tactical officer looked uncertain but not opposed, and his science officer was making notes. Like this was the most fascinating thing that had ever happened. And maybe it was. Captain, his communications officer said, and Earth Command says the decision is yours and they trust your judgment. And they also said, and I quote, and if this actually works, you get a medal, and if it doesn't, well, court-martial. You posthumously, Ryan laughed, despite himself, and that sounded about right, and he looked back at the screen at Maya, who was holding her breath, and at Lyra, who was trying to look impassive but failing, and at the small dragon who was perched on Maya's shoulder looking at him, with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for a creature that size. I have conditions, Ryan said, and Maya gasped and Lyra tensed. And first, you visit Earth and meet my family, because if I'm doing this, my mother deserves to know she has a granddaughter. And second, we do this properly with documents and agreements and everything legal and above board. And third, and he looked at Lyra, and you teach me about your culture because I can't be a good father if I don't understand where she comes from. Maya's face split into the biggest smile Ryan had ever seen, and she started jumping up and down, and Ember shot small fireworks of flame into the air, and yes, 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 she shouted, and oh, thank you, and you're going to be the best dad ever, and wait until I tell my friends. Lyra looked stunned, and her composure finally breaking completely, and you accept. Ryan nodded, and feeling like he was stepping off a cliff, but somehow knowing it was the right thing to do. And I accept, and welcome to the family. Maya. The cheering that erupted from the other ship was deafening, and Maya was spinning in circles, and other elves were crowding around, congratulating Lyra, who looked like she might cry, and Ember was doing loops in the air, and somewhere in the background Ryan could hear the deep roaring calls of larger dragons celebrating. Sir Amy said, her voice awed, and the fleet is standing down and all weapons are powering off, and Captain, they are actually doing it. Ryan watched as Maya pressed her face to the screen, and I'm going to Earth, and I have a dad, and this is the best day ever. And Ryan thought about how he had woken up this morning expecting a routine patrol, and how he was going to end it as an adoptive father to an alien princess, and how his mother was going to react when he brought home his new daughter. And somehow, despite the insanity of it all, he found himself smiling. 3 days later, Ryan stood in the docking bay of the Starlight and watched as the elegant Crystal transport ship settled onto the deck with barely a whisper of sound, and his dress uniform felt too tight and his hands were sweating, and he had faced down hostile aliens and space pirates without this much nervousness, but meeting your new daughter officially was apparently more terrifying than combat. Easy, sir, his first officer said, standing beside him, and you've already made the hard choice, and now comes the fun part. The fun part, Ryan muttered, and adopting an alien child whose mother commands a fleet of warships, and what could possibly go wrong? The transport ship's door opened with a soft shimmer like light passing through water, and Maya came bounding out with Ember flying circles around her head, and she was wearing what looked like formal robes in silver and purple, but she had already managed to get them rumpled, and her hair was escaping from its careful braids. And when she saw Ryan, her face lit up like the sun. Dad, she shouted, and ran straight at him, and Ryan barely had time to brace himself before she crashed into him and wrapped her arms around his waist and hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. I, Maya, he said, and found himself automatically hugging her back, and his heart doing something complicated. In his chest. You're really real, she said, looking up at him with those huge purple eyes, and I was worried I dreamed it all, and that I would wake up, and you would be gone. But you're here, and you're real, and we're really family now. We're really family, Ryan confirmed, and then looked up as Lyra emerged from the transport much more gracefully, and she was wearing different armor now, and something that looked ceremonial, with flowing fabric mixed with metallic plates, and her silver hair was loose around her shoulders, and she looked both regal and uncomfortable. Captain Miller, she said formally, and thank you for honoring the agreement. Ryan, please, he said, and if we're family, we should probably use first names, and this is strange enough without standing on ceremony. Lyra hesitated, then nodded, and Ryan. Then, and I must confess, I did not expect this situation when I planned this sector's campaign, and my daughter has a talent for the unexpected. Maya had already let go of Ryan and was looking around the docking bay with fascination. And is this the whole ship, she asked, and it's so much smaller than ours, and oh, what's that? And she pointed at a maintenance drone. That's a maintenance bot, Ryan explained, and it helps repair the ship and keeps everything running. We use magic for that, Maya said matter-of-factly. And Mom taught me the basic repair spells last year. And can I see the rest of the ship? And do you have a cafeteria? And what do humans eat? And the database said pizza, but I'm not sure what that is. One thing at a time, Ryan said, but found himself smiling at her enthusiasm. And how about we start with a tour, and then we can talk about everything else? Maya grabbed his hand and started pulling him toward the corridor, and Ember landed on Ryan's shoulder, making him freeze, but the little dragon just settled there like it was the most natural thing in the world, and chirped contentedly, and Ryan met Lyra's eyes over Maya's head. She has been like this for 3 days, Lyra said, and a hint of amusement in her voice, and she has packed and unpacked 7 times and asked me approximately 400 questions about human customs, and I believe she has memorized your entire service record. You looked up my service record, Ryan, said as Maya dragged him into the corridor. Of course, Lyra said, following them, and I needed to ensure you were worthy, and your record is impressive. And you have shown bravery and compassion and sound judgment, and I would not have agreed to this if I thought otherwise. The tour took 2 hours, because Maya wanted to examine everything, and she was fascinated by the engine room and asked the chief engineer so many questions about human technology that he finally just handed her a data pad with technical manuals. And she was delighted by the observation deck, and pressed her face to the window and stared at the stars for 10 minutes, and she was extremely interested in the galley where the cook showed her how the food synthesizers worked. This is amazing, she breathed, watching the machine construct a sandwich, and we have to grow most of our food or hunt for it. And this is like magic, but with machines. They finally ended up in the small conference room that Ryan had set up for their official meeting, and Maya immediately claimed the chair next to his, while Lyra sat across from them, and between them, Ryan had prepared a stack of documents that his legal officer had helped him draft. So Ryan said, and trying to sound professional, and we've drawn up a preliminary custody agreement, and obviously this is unprecedented, so we can adjust anything that does not work. Lyra picked up the papers and started reading while Maya swung her legs and played with Ember. And can I ask you questions? Maya said suddenly. Of course, Ryan said. Do you have other children? No, Ryan said. And you're my first. Maya's smile could have powered a small city, and good, she said, then seemed to catch herself, and I would have been okay with siblings, but I'm glad I'm first. And do you have a wife? No, Ryan said again, and wondering where this was going. A girlfriend. Maya, he started, but she interrupted him. Just checking, she said seriously, and because if you're going to be my dad, I need to know who else is family. And the database said, humans have extended families with lots of people. Ryan glanced at Lyra, who was watching this exchange with interest. And I have a mother and a father and a younger sister, he said, and they're all on Earth, and I've already told them about you, and they are very excited to meet you. I have grandparents, Maya said in wonder, and an aunt, and this keeps getting better. These terms are acceptable, Lyra said, looking up from the documents, and you have been more than fair, and the visitation schedule is reasonable, and the cultural exchange provisions are appropriate, and I have only one addition. What is it? Ryan asked. I want regular reports on Maya's well-being, Lyra said, and her voice firm but with an undercurrent of something vulnerable. And she is still my daughter, and I need to know she is safe and happy. Of course, Ryan said. And you can visit whenever you want, and this is not about taking her away from you, and it's about giving her what she was asking for. Lyra nodded, and for a moment she looked less like a fleet commander and more like a worried mother. And thank you, she said quietly. Maya had been watching this exchange, and now she looked at both of them, and so we are all family now, she asked. All family. Ryan confirmed, Maya's eyes filled with tears but happy ones, and she got up and walked around the table and hugged her mother, and then came back and hugged Ryan, and Ember flew between them, chirping and landing on first one shoulder, then the other. I have the best family in the galaxy, Maya announced, and then she pulled back and looked at Ryan seriously. And so when do I meet Grandma? And you said, she makes cookies, and the database said cookies are important to human bonding. Ryan laughed, and tomorrow, he said, and the Starlight is heading back to Earth for resupply. And you'll stay with me at my family home for a week, a whole week, Maya breathed. And then back to Mom for 2 weeks, and then back to you, and this is perfect. Lyra stood, and I should return to my ship, she said. And I have much to explain to my fleet commanders, and they are not entirely pleased with this turn of events, but they will honor my oath. Some of them are mad at me, Maya said sadly. Some of them do not understand, Lyra corrected gently. But they will learn. And change is difficult for our people. And we have been at war for so long that peace feels strange. Maybe that is why the Covenant exists, Ryan said, and maybe your ancestors knew that sometimes children see more clearly than adults. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, and then smiled, and it was the first real smile Ryan had seen from her. And perhaps you are right, and perhaps Maya is wiser than us all. Maya preened at the compliment, and, "Of course I am," she said. "And I ended a 300-year war, and that's pretty smart, humble too," Ryan said dryly. "And we will need to work on that." Maya giggled, and Lyra said her goodbyes and promised to check in daily. And as she walked back to her transport, Ryan watched Maya wave until her mother disappeared, and then the girl turned to him with shining eyes. So she said, "And what do we do now?" Dad, Ryan felt. His chest tightened at that word dad, and he thought about all the responsibility it carried and all the joy. "And now," he said, "and how about we get you settled in your quarters, and then maybe we can try that pizza you were asking about." "Best day ever," Maya declared and grabbed his hand again, and, "Come on, Ember, and we have a whole ship to explore, and Dad, yes, thank you, and for saying yes, and for giving me a family." Ryan squeezed her hand gently, and, "Thank you for asking," he said, "and I think you just gave me a family too." The starlight dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, and Maya had her face pressed against the observation window and her breath fogging the glass as she stared at the blue and green planet below. And Ember was perched on her shoulder, making excited chirping sounds. "It's so blue," she whispered, "and I have never seen so much water, and look at those clouds, and oh, is that where you grew up?" Ryan stood beside her and pointed to the North American continent. "And see, that area there with all the lights, and that's where my family lives and where you will meet your grandparents." Maya turned to look at him, and her purple eyes wide with nervousness. "And what if they do not like me? And what if I say something wrong? And I practiced all the human greetings, but what if I mess up? They are going to love you," Ryan said with confidence he actually felt, "and my mom has been talking about nothing else for 3 days, and she has already prepared your room and bought you more stuffed animals than one person could possibly need, and my dad built you a bookshelf." Maya's uncertainty melted into excitement, and a room, and with a bed, and stuffed animals, and like in the shows, and oh, this is really happening. The landing. Shuttle touched down 20 minutes later in the private section of the spaceport, and as they walked down the ramp, Ryan saw his family waiting, and his mother was practically vibrating with excitement, and his father had his hands in his pockets, but was smiling, and his younger sister was holding up her phone recording everything. "Mom, Dad," Ryan called, and, "This is Maya, and Maya. This is your grandmother, Patricia, and your grandfather, Tom, and," but he did not get to finish because Patricia had already swept forward and knelt down in front of Maya, and, "Oh my goodness," she said, and her voice thick with emotion, and, "Look at you, and you are even more beautiful than the photos." Maya looked at Ryan uncertainly, and then back at Patricia, and, "Hello, grandmother," she said formally, "and it is an honor to meet you, and I promise to bring honor to your family." Patricia laughed and pulled Maya into a hug, and, "Oh, sweetheart, we are way past formal around here, and you can call me Grandma or Gram, or whatever feels right, and welcome to the family." Maya stood stiffly for a moment and then slowly relaxed into the hug, and her eyes closing as she wrapped her arms around Patricia, and when she pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. "And you are very soft," she whispered, and you smell like flowers." "That's my lavender lotion," Patricia said, and wiping her own eyes. "And now, let me look at you properly. And oh, and what is this little darling?" Ember had been watching cautiously, but now hopped down from Maya's shoulder and bowed his small head to Patricia, and the older woman gasped with delight. "This is Ember," Maya said, and pride in her voice, "and he is my bonded dragon, and he has been with me since he hatched 2 years ago." Tom stepped forward and extended his hand to Maya. "And welcome to Earth, young lady," he said, "and I hear you are quite the dragon rider." Maya shook his hand carefully. "And yes, sir," she said, "and I have won 3 competitions in my age group, and Ember and I are training for the advanced trials next year." Tom grinned, "And a champion and runs in the family, I see, and your dad here was the best pilot in his academy class." Maya looked at Ryan with new respect, and really, Ryan confirmed, and feeling slightly embarrassed, Ryan's sister Nicole finally pushed forward, and "Hi," she said brightly, "and I'm your aunt Nicole, and I am so excited to have a niece. And can I see your dragon up close?" Maya nodded, and Ember obligingly flew to Nicole's outstretched hand, and Nicole made delighted noises and started taking pictures, and Maya giggled, and the tension Ryan had been carrying since they landed started to ease. The drive to the family home took 30 minutes, and Maya spent the entire time with her face pressed to the window of the car. And look at all the trees, she said, and the buildings, and so many humans, and do they all live in this one place, and how do you keep track of everyone? Tom laughed from the driver's seat, and this is just a small town, kiddo, and wait until you see the actual cities. The house was a comfortable 2-story with a big yard and a porch swing, and Patricia had clearly been preparing because there were welcome balloons tied to the mailbox, and the smell of baking cookies drifted out when they opened the door. Maya stopped in the doorway, and her eyes going wide as she took everything in, and the family photos on the walls, and the comfortable furniture, and the warm lighting. And this is where you grew up? She asked Ryan. This is home, Ryan said. Home, Maya repeated, like she was testing the word. And then she stepped inside, and Ember launched from her shoulder to explore the ceiling. And do I really get my own room here? Patricia took her hand. And come see, sweetie. And I hope you like it. They climbed the stairs, and Patricia opened the door to what had been the guest room, and Maya made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. And the walls were painted soft purple, and there was a bed with a fluffy comforter covered in stars, and shelves full of books and stuffed animals, and a desk by the window, and on the wall was a poster showing different types of earth dragons from mythology. It's perfect, Maya whispered, and she walked in slowly like she was afraid it might disappear, and touched the bed and the stuffed unicorn and the books, and no one has ever, and I have never. And she turned to Patricia with tears streaming down her face, and thank you. Patricia was crying too, and hugged Maya close, and you are family now, honey, and this is yours always, and you can come here whenever you want. Maya buried her face in Patricia's shoulder and cried, and Ember settled on the bed and made soft, comforting sounds, and Ryan leaned against the doorframe and watched, and his own throat tight. Tom appeared beside him. And you did good, son, he said quietly. I hope so, Ryan said. And this is all happening so fast? The best things usually do, Tom said. And she is a sweet kid, and you can see she just wanted to be loved. They spent the afternoon showing Maya around the house, and the yard and the neighborhood, and she was fascinated by everything, and the way the grass felt under her bare feet, and the birds that landed on the fence, and the neighbor's dog who barked, but then let her pet him. Is all of Earth like this? She asked as they sat on the porch swing. And so peaceful and so green parts of it, Ryan said, and we have cities too, and deserts and mountains and oceans, and I thought maybe tomorrow we could go to the beach, the ocean. Maya breathed, and yes, please, and I have wanted to see it since I read about it. That evening, Patricia made a huge dinner, and Maya tried to eat everything, even though she clearly did not like the Brussels sprouts, and she asked 100 questions about human food and customs and family traditions, and she told them about life in the Celestial Fleet, and about dragon riding competitions, and about the magic she was learning. You use magic? Ryan asked, and like actual magic. Maya nodded. And watch. And she held out her hand and whispered something in a language that sounded like music, and a small ball of purple light appeared floating above her palm. And Ember chirped and added his own spark of fire, and together they made the lights dance through the air. The family watched in amazement, and Nicole immediately asked if Maya could teach her, and Tom wanted to know the physics behind it, and Patricia just smiled and clapped and declared it the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. Later after dinner, Ryan tucked Maya into her new bed, and she was clutching the stuffed unicorn and looking up at him with sleepy eyes. Dad, she said, and this was the best day of my life. Even better than when I said yes. Ryan asked. She thought about it seriously, and that was the best decision day, she said, but this was the best family day, and thank you for bringing me here, and your family is wonderful, and I love them already. They love you too, Ryan said, and tucked the blanket around her. And now get some sleep, and tomorrow we have the beach to explore. Maya yawned. And will you tell me a story first, she asked, and Mom used to tell me stories about the ancient dragon riders, but I want to hear a human story. Ryan thought for a moment, and then began. And once upon a time there was a young girl who was braver than she knew, and she wanted a family, and she was willing to ask for what she needed, even though it was scary. And even though she did not know if anyone would say yes, and her courage changed everything. Maya's eyes were already closing, and did she get her family, she murmured. She did, Ryan said softly, and they loved her very much, and she lived happily ever after. That's a good story, Maya whispered. And then she was asleep, and Ember curled up on the pillow beside. Her head. Ryan sat there for a long moment, watching her breathe and thinking about how much had changed in just a few days, and how this small person had somehow become the most important thing in his world. He found his parents in the living room, and Patricia was wiping her eyes again. And she is precious, Patricia said. And you made the right choice, Ryan. She needed someone. Tom added, and you needed her too, even if you did not know it yet. Ryan sat down and felt the weight of everything settling on his shoulders. And I am terrified, he admitted. And what if I mess this up, and what if I am not a good enough father? Then you will learn and do better, Patricia said firmly. And that is what parenting is, and none of us know what we are doing at first, and we just love them and try our best, and it will be enough. Ryan hoped she was right, and as he looked up at the ceiling toward where Maya slept, he made a silent promise to that little girl who had been brave enough to ask for what she needed, and he would be brave enough to give it to her, and no matter what, and he would be the father she deserved. 6 months had passed since Maya came into Ryan's life, and he stood on the observation deck of the Starlight watching a dragon racing competition take place in the space around the ship, and beside him Lyra stood with her arms crossed and her face tense with concentration. She is doing well, Lyra said, but her voice tight, and the other racers are older and more experienced. She is going to win, Ryan said confidently, and pointed to where Maya and Ember were weaving through the obstacle course of energy rings and floating platforms, and look at that coordination, and they have been practicing that move for weeks. On the viewing screen, Maya's silver hair streamed behind her as Ember banked hard around a pylon and shot forward through 3 rings in rapid succession, and her laugh came through the communication channel, clear and joyful. Did you see that, Dad? She called, and Ember just pulled off the spiral dive perfectly. I saw, Ryan called back, and trying not to sound as nervous as he felt. And keep your speed up around the next turn. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of adjustments and learning and negotiating, and Maya split her time between Earth and the Celestial Fleet, and Ryan had learned more about elf culture and dragon care and magic theory than he ever imagined possible, and he had taught Maya about human customs and helped her with her Earth school assignments and learned to braid hair in the elaborate styles her people favored. The relationship with Lyra had evolved too, and at first she had been formal and distant and treating their interactions like military briefings. But gradually, she had relaxed and started sharing stories about Maya's childhood, and asking Ryan's advice about parenting challenges and joining family dinners. When she visited, your mother sent care packages, Ryan said now as they watched Maya complete another difficult maneuver, and chocolate chip cookies and some books about Earth animals. Lyra smiled slightly, and Patricia is a remarkable woman, and she treats Maya like her own blood. She is her own blood, Ryan said, and family is not just genetics. Lyra's smile widened, and you sound like Maya. And she says things like that now and talks about how love makes family, not just birth. I wonder where she learned that, Ryan said with mock innocence. The race was entering its final stage, and Maya was in second, place behind a teenage elf boy, whose dragon was larger and faster. But Maya had always been clever. And as they approached the last obstacle course, she whispered something to Ember, and the small dragon suddenly folded his wings and dropped like a stone. Lyra gasped, and Ryan held his breath, and just when it seemed like they would crash, Ember snapped his wings open and shot upward at an angle that took them through a gap in the rings that no one else had used, and suddenly they were in first place with a clear path to the finish. Maya let out a whoop of victory as they crossed the finish line, and Ember roared triumph and flame into the space, and Ryan found himself cheering, and Lyra was clapping and her eyes shining with pride. That is my daughter, she said, and brilliant and fearless and unstoppable. Our daughter, Ryan corrected gently, and yes, she is all of those things. Lyra looked at him, and something complicated crossing her face. And thank you, she said quietly, and for sharing her with me, and for not trying to take her away, and I know some human parents might have, and Ryan shook his head and, "She loves you, Lyra, and nothing will change that. And I am just grateful to be part of her life." The competition officials were announcing the results, and Maya had won her age division, and as she flew Ember back to the observation deck, her face was glowing with happiness. And when the doors opened, she ran straight to Ryan and Lyra and hugged them both. "Did you see?" she said breathlessly. "And we won, and Ember was perfect, and the spiral dive worked exactly like we planned. You were amazing," Ryan said, "and I am so proud of you." Lyra cupped Maya's face gently. "And you honored our people today," she said, "and your father would have been proud." Maya's birth father had died in battle before she was born, and Lyra rarely spoke of him. But when she did, her voice carried a weight of old grief, and Maya touched her mother's hand. "I have 2 dads now," she said softly, "and one who watches from the stars and one who teaches me about cookies and earth music, and I am lucky." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "And yes," she said, "and you are, and so am I." They celebrated with a dinner in the Starlight's galley, and Patricia and Tom had joined via video call, and Nicole was there in person, having taken leave to watch the race, and the ship's crew had decorated with streamers and brought out a cake, and Maya sat at the head of the table looking happier than Ryan had ever seen her. "I want to make a toast," Nicole said, standing and raising her glass, "and to Maya, who is the coolest niece in any galaxy, and who taught us that family can be chosen, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for what you need." Everyone raised their glasses, and Maya blushed purple, and Ember chirped from his perch, and Patricia added, "And to Ryan, who had the wisdom to say yes, and to Lyra, who had the courage to keep her promise, and to all of us for proving that peace is possible." After dinner, Ryan found Lyra standing alone on the observation deck and staring out at the stars, and her fleet was visible in the distance and had maintained their position in neutral space for the past 6 months and honoring the treaty that had been drafted. "You are thinking too much," Ryan said. Joining her, "I am thinking about my people," Lyra said. "And for 300 years we have been at war, and now suddenly we are not, and some of them do not know what to do with peace. It takes time," Ryan said, but look what you have accomplished, and your fleet has started trading with human colonies, and cultural exchanges are happening, and just last week I heard your chief engineer talking to our design team about combining magic and technology." Lyra nodded. "And it is strange," she admitted. But perhaps good strange. And Maya talks about her Earth school and her human friends and the things she is learning, and I see how happy she is, and I wonder if I deprived her of this for too long." "You gave her what you could," Ryan said, and when she asked for more, you found a way to give her that too. And that is all any parent can do. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked, suddenly, and saying yes and taking on this responsibility. "Never," Ryan said without hesitation. "And Maya changed my life, and she taught me what it means to really be family. And some days are hard, and some days I have no idea what I am doing, but I would not trade this for anything." Lyra's shoulders relaxed, and I am glad she said, "And because I need to tell you something, and the council has approved my request, and I am stepping down as fleet commander." Ryan's eyebrows shot up. "And what I have been at war for most of my life," Lyra said. "And I am tired, and I want to spend more time with Maya. And the council has agreed to let me take an advisory position, and fewer responsibilities, and more time for family." "That is wonderful," Ryan said, "and Maya will be thrilled." Lyra turned to face him, and I was thinking, she said hesitantly, "and perhaps I could visit Earth more often and maybe stay for longer periods, and if that would not be an imposition, you are always welcome," Ryan said, "and Maya would love it, and honestly, I could use the help, and do you know how hard it is to do elf hair braids?" Lyra laughed, and a real genuine laugh, "And I will teach you," she promised. And then Ryan, "And thank you, and for everything, and for giving my daughter the life she deserved, and for giving me a reason to choose peace." They stood together in comfortable silence and watching the stars and thinking about how much had changed and how much was still changing. And then Maya's voice came over the comm. "System Dad, Lyra, and come quick. And Ember just learned a new trick, and you have to see it." Ryan and Lyra exchanged a smile. "And duty calls," Ryan said. "The best kind of duty," Lyra agreed. They found Maya in the training room, and Ember was indeed showing off a new trick and creating complex patterns of fire in the air, and Maya was directing him like a conductor, and her hands moving gracefully and her face serious with concentration. "Watch this," she said, and Ember wove the flames into a shape, and it took Ryan a moment to realize it was words, and they spelled out family. In flickering fire, Maya turned to them with a huge smile. "And I have been practicing for weeks," she said, "and to thank you both, and for being the best family anyone could ask." For Ryan felt his throat tighten and Lyra wiped her eyes, and together they walked over and pulled Maya into a hug, and Ember settled on Ryan's shoulder and chirped contentedly. "You know," Ryan said, "and when you first asked me to be your dad, I had no idea what I was getting into." "And now?" Maya asked. "Now," Ryan said, and looking at this brave, clever girl, and her brilliant mother and the small dragon who had become part of his daily life. "And now I cannot imagine my life any other way." Maya hugged him, tighter. "And me neither," she said. "And this is exactly where I'm supposed to be and with exactly the family I was meant to have." Lyra rested her hand on Maya's head, and sometimes she said softly, "And the bravest thing we can do is reach for something new and trust that others will reach back." And sometimes, Ryan added, "and the best decisions are the ones that seem crazy at first." Maya pulled back and looked at both of them seriously, and so she said, "And what are we going to do next?" And, "Because I have ideas." Ryan and Lyra exchanged a look and braced themselves. "Of course you do," Ryan said. Maya's grin was wicked, and I was thinking, she said, and Grandma mentioned something about wanting to learn magic, and Aunt Nicole asked about dragon riding lessons, and I thought maybe we could have a big family gathering, and with both humans and elves and dragons, and it would be like a peace celebration and a cultural festival," Lyra said slowly, "and to show both our peoples working together with cookies," Maya added, and "because everything is better with cookies." Ryan laughed and threw his hands up, and "Fine," he said, "and let us plan the most ambitious cross-species family gathering in history. And what could possibly go wrong? Everything will be perfect," Maya said confidently, "and because we are family and families can do anything." And looking at her standing there with hope and determination shining in her eyes, and with Lyra smiling beside her, and Ember adding his own chirp of agreement, and Ryan thought that maybe, just maybe, she was right, because they had already accomplished the impossible, and they had chosen each other, and built a family across species, and ended a war with love. And if they could do that, and Ryan thought, and they could do absolutely anything.